Hello everyone and welcome back to Beyond the Veil Background Information. We're doing Angels and Demons again and we're about to start the big category of Lucifer, Satan, the Devil. So, as always, I'll give you a quote from one of my stories where they mention. Then for this one I'll give you the background information about Lucifer, the fallen angel. And then I'll go back to the normal thing as we go through it. I'll go back to how I normally run these things. So this is a big topic, so I've split it into three videos. Three because that just seems a bit easier. And also, I've started to put the sources in my videos now, and they're also on the scripts. So if you need to find information and stuff like that, I've given the generic places I get a lot of it. I've given the generic places I give a lot of it for, so hopefully that's useful. But let's get into this. So the whole pride comes before a fall thing. I often wonder if that phrase came before or after anyone was ever made aware of the story of Lucifer, or if that was the same before. The odd things you ponder. Quote from the Viper King. So we're on the topic of Lucifer and Satan and, well, the devil. This is a big topic and actually more than a little complicated, and thus I separated it into three parts. For the first part, we're going to discuss Lucifer, the fallen angel, and where their name and whatnot comes from, and then how they are linked to Satan or the devil. Then we'll discuss Satan and the devil in the next part, which might be a very chunky part, and then finally end on the devil in popular culture and my own character profile for Lucifer from the Beyond the Veil universe here. I hope you will be you will be willing to sit around for it because it's quite interesting, but very long. Listed as the very sin of pride itself, Lucifer either is a fallen angel amongst the hosts of hell that claims the title of prince, or he is the devil itself. Depending on your source and where you often personally feel, depends on whether Lucifer is one of the many names of the devil or not. In Hebrew, the name is thought to mean shining one, but it is more particularly from Latin and morning star, as Lucifer's name does not come from a title for the devil exactly. Originally, it was mentioned in the Vulgate, a 4th century translation of the Bible, wherein it was in reference to the morning star or the sight of Venus in the sky. However, it is the 16th century translation of the King James Bible, wherein Lucifer is used as a name for the devil and for this being. Why? Good question. Well, the translation was already used in an earlier Wycliffe Bible translation, but Venus and its link with the fall is particularly interesting. So, to explain it, we go back to the usual problem with gods and beings of worship in the region that later Christianity thought to identify as demonic and particularly as a false god. This is the situation with the planet Venus in particular, which was long worshipped in different forms and different regions with different connotations. Now, the story of the fall from heaven is not specifically a story confined to the Judeo-Christian side of things, but is a concept that has occurred in many other mythologies and stories, which we know have some link to the early pieces in the Bible. Certainly, the idea of someone comparing their ability to a god and being punished for it is not a new concept, and can be seen in every culture as the usual warning against pridefulness. But let's acquaint ourselves with the seeming story of Lucifer and then break it down. The story goes that amongst God's angels was Lucifer the brightest and seemingly the favourite, but despite having high favour, Lucifer thought too much of himself. In fact, he thought to compare himself to God and then to consider himself higher. Thus, Lucifer used their gift to gather other angels into servitude about him and rebelled against the Most High, only to be cast out of heaven for their crime and punished to dwell in hell, misshapen and altered from their once glorious and beautiful form. Lucifer is the sin of pride, the pride before the fall, but this summation is not, in fact, the way the original story of Lucifer begins. And I've already developed him into Satan by waging war and being cursed into hell. But you'll find as we go through that Lucifer really isn't that big initially. In Sumerian mythos, where stories like the flood are thought to have their place, so the story created around the morning star Venus and its position in the sky is weaved into the story of a being striving to be higher and failing only to crash lower than before. The Jewish Encyclopedia first identifies its origins in the Babylonian story of Etana, who fought to try and climb to the highest point to be amongst the gods and was hurled downwards for trying. There's also a Canaanite story where the morning star is personified as Atta, who was trying for Baal's throne. In finding he could not manage to do anything against Baal, he decides if he can't have the sky, he could have the world below and accepts the rule in the underworld. There are also thoughts that it might link to an older myth with another being named Hellel trying to dethrone the high god El and failing to. Some might posit this as a source for some might posit that as a source for the name Hell, but that's debatable. All the same, these figures are linked to the morning star. In this vein of mythologies and pride, I often think of Bellerophon, who, after defeating the Chimera, rode Pegasus up to Olympus, believing he was entitled to a godhood, but was thrown from Pegasus to his death. The morning star, Venus, often held a position of powerful symbolism within the natives of the region, aside from associations with gods, some of which were actually very good and held it in high regard. However, because of the link to these earlier gods and their fallings, its symbolism became that of a fallen angel, and thus another god, shall we say, was demonized in later understanding. These older sources influenced the Jewish writers Enoch and also on to inspiring Iblis in Islam. However, I'll cover Iblis in the next video. Now, in the Bible, Lucifer by name is not given to the devil, and though initially found in old translations of text from Isaiah, it is no longer translated as such. The infamous line that many often point to from this old translation as reference to Lucifer the Fallen actually translates to "How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn." Rabbinic Judaism also keeps to this proper translation and rejects the idea of rebel and fallen angels. But it is from this the motif of the fallen angel really begins. It is from that Lucifer develops into the prince of fallen angels, the favourite of God that dared to assume himself to be greater and then failed utterly. Even in the Bible regarding Adam and Eve, it is neither Satan nor Lucifer who is mentioned, but merely the serpent, not even really referencing the snake. But this leads into the development of Lucifer into Satan, aligning them together because the idea there could have been another angel that fell from pride was not as popular as them being wedged together. Even so, during the time when the ancient gods were being demonized and turned into sins, Lucifer was still distinct from Satan and turned into the sin of pride. The sin of pride has the same story of falling for assuming themselves too great and being thrown aside for attempting to become a god. Even Dante and Milton recognized Lucifer as a separate entity to Satan. But as time went by, it was later deemed Lucifer was the angelic name and Satan is what they have become. Everyone asks the question just as they ask about the development of the devil in Christianity. How did Lucifer become equated as Satan? Well, as previously mentioned, having a second rebel angel that thought he might be greater than God was too similar. In fact, the thought might be that one time is certainly similar. In fact, the fault might be that one time is certainly that person's problem, but two, bringing up the same point might be a question on God management. As Lucifer was also a more artistic sounding name and the idea of the fallen angel became more romanticized, thus Lucifer became a more comfortable name for the devil. Even if you search the question, how did Lucifer become equated with the devil, you learn that most claim Lucifer is the Latinized name of the devil. Thereby, Lucifer is just someone else's name for the same person. It's certainly very strange, but like many, I'm quite comfortable equating the figures as the same for the sake of fiction, but it's certainly hard to figure out what is actually going on. Final comments. Yes, I know this Lucifer section is a bit short, but in truth, when you actually look into it, Lucifer as Lucifer is Venus. It's just the morning star story that's been equated so much to later stories of the devil and building up the devil as this rebel angel that it's hard to tell what came first, really, the devil or Lucifer. So it's easy to just wedge them together. But I hope you found that interesting. Thank you for listening.